So you want to try out a brand new weathering technique, but you're not that comfortable about doing it on one of your own pieces. I've got a way to try that out coming up on JC's Rip Track. Hi there, my name's John and welcome to JC's Rip Track. If you're looking for tips and advice on how to transform your plastic models into something that you would find on the rails today, then please hit subscribe and that little bell icon and you can be notified anytime I upload a new video. So what is the one technique that you've wanted to try but haven't yet? Please let me know in the comments section down below. Throughout a lot of these videos, I've demonstrated a number of different techniques, either on my own models or on a commission that I've received. But how do I know if a given technique is going to work? Much of it comes out of experience. I've done it before, and I know it's going to work when I do it again. But what happens if it's something new? For example, when I worked on this leased locomotive, I wanted to see how different fading techniques would work over the blue because I wasn't sure which one would work best. From the 1,000 subscriber giveaway, the two free commissions that I'm working on are both red, but the prototypes show that the red color on each of them weather very differently. I also recently acquired gouache paints, as well as these Pan Pastels. And while I could just simply try them out on an old rail car or a piece of rolling stock that I happen to have, sometimes it's better to actually use something different, a piece of plastic, or perhaps even a knife, a fork, and a spoon. Creating the test pieces is fairly straightforward. You can use scrap plastic card if you have it, or you can pick up a box of plastic cutlery, which will give you more than enough for what you need to do. Paint these up as you normally would, either trying to match the color of your test subject, or just straight up testing paint if that's what you're doing. I used a test piece made from two pieces of plastic card glued together, painted blue for the locomotive. And more recently, I airbrushed these pieces of cutlery first with white primer, and then used AK Interactive Signal Red to provide the test base for the commissions. Testing out new techniques or color mixes have several benefits when it comes to weathering your models. The first is, you can see how something works on something that doesn't matter. After all, using a plastic knife that costs just pennies is a lot more cost effective than trying it out on a $25 car or a $250 locomotive. If it doesn't work, you haven't lost anything, and then you will have the benefit of knowing how it works just in case the technique might work on something else later. For example, I was curious to see how gouache paints would behave as a wash. Instead of testing them on a model, I used a fork because the shape on the back of a plastic fork gives a lot of texture that gives a wash something to stick to, and it's something to test it on. Once I saw how it worked, I was then able to use it on these pulp tanks for my club's paper mill project. Because I knew how it would behave with the fork, I knew how it would behave on the tank, and that I would need to do some further manipulation of the wash simply using water once the wash had dried initially. The second thing is, you can use these test pieces to do some color matching, particularly to a prototype. As I mentioned earlier, the red locomotive and the covered hopper that I'm working on fade and wear differently. The Rock Island locomotive fades lightly if you look at the prototype picture. If anything, it leans towards a desaturated red, although not quite pink. On the other hand, the ATGX covered hopper faded to a more orange color before then going very dark. It means that though they are the same color, the prototype examples weather differently, and therefore the models need a different approach. So here's a more in-depth look of how I did that. After priming and painting a few pieces of cutlery to a suitable red, I could then go on and test a basic airbrush fade using AK Interactive's real color line. I had acquired off-white, cream white, and flat white as potential colors for this job. I knew that flat white would just turn it pink, so instead I used it in a mix tinted with AK's yellow in the same line. I put a piece of tape across each knife and then lightly airbrushed each mix across the knife, concentrating the fading mix to one side of the knife, creating a gradient. I could then do a side-by-side comparison of the colors and then make a decision. Because these were part of a commission, I posted pictures over on my Patreon page for the owners of the model to give their input on it. From this, I would go on to use the flat white yellow mix for the fade on the red covered hopper to push it slightly orange, and I used off-white on the Rock Island locomotive to slightly desaturate the red without turning it pink. When the color matching test was done, I then went on to use another experiment testing out these Pan Pastels to see how they would affect darkening the paint on the red. It also gave me a chance to figure out different ways on how to actually use these things. I started by testing the Pan Pastel colors on a spoon that was just primed white rather than the base red to see how they behaved in a basic application. I then tried different colors over the red knives to see how the colors behaved and what effects I could do. Including streaking straight over an existing application. I was also curious to see how clear coats or fixative affect the look of the Pan Pastels. Since I had applied the Pan Pastels to more than one of these pieces, I could then try a couple of airbrush clear coats over it, namely a Thin Down Future and AK Interactive's Flat Varnish. This would be important to see if the techniques that I'm already familiar with could be then applied over top of it. Now, I will be doing a separate video on Pan Pastels and how they're used, but these test cards have helped me figure out how they can be used and how they can be used well. Now, here's a short bit of advice. The Pan Pastels work really well and they have great potential, but don't treat them like and don't use them like weathering powders or pigments. They really are quite different and they're going to occupy a different way of weathering than either using paints or powders. But I'll get into a new video on that soon. Now, test cards are a really useful way in trying out new things. Whether you're experimenting with something that is completely new, or you're wanting to test out a technique that you've seen but not tried yourself, this is a really good way to do it. I should note that even if a given technique is widely used or widely known but it's new to you, then doing a test card is a great way to get yourself immersed into it. The idea is to get comfortable with the technique before you start applying it to a model. Of course, if you have access to older scrap models or something out of a bargain bin, this is a great way of doing it as well. The truth is, when I entered the Down and Dirty Weathering Contest over a year ago now, the gondolas that I entered were, in fact, test pieces for techniques that I was familiar with, but I wanted to see how they worked in N-scale. So I hope you found this helpful, and in using test cards or test spoons or whatever it is that you happen to use is a way to get you past the blocks that is keeping you from weathering your models, then go for it. And if you want more tips and advice on how to get the most out of your painting and weathering projects, then please hit subscribe and that little bell icon and you can be notified anytime I upload a new video. Also, if you haven't done so already, please check out some of the other videos in this channel, as well as clicking on the links down below where you can learn about some of the products that I used in this video, as well as different links on my social media. You can also connect to my Facebook page, my Twitter account, my Instagram account, as well as my Patreon page if you want to get a chance to have some input on future content here on JC's Rip Track. So thanks for watching, good luck, and may you keep on track.